You are listening to the Beyond Unreal podcast, episode 14. I am the White Dragon.
And this is Sir Briz.
This week, we're going to talk about the official build system that Epic has put out, a couple of the changes, and then we're going to go over a couple of big pet peeves that the community has given us to talk about. So let's go into the official builds.
Okay, so Epic has released a pre-alpha if you haven't been paying attention. One of the biggest complaints we got about the podcast last week was that we didn't mention that builds were coming back. We did know builds were coming back, and now they're back.
Yeah, well, we were kind of playing it safe because we weren't sure what we were allowed to say.
Yeah.
So you have to be registered on the forum. But if you are registered on the forum, there's a post in the announcements forum, and there's also a sticky in the general discussion page that will take you to the quote-unquote secret forum, yes, where there is a single post that has the links to all of the binaries.
Yeah, so today they released an update to the build. Today they released a Windows and Linux version of the game, and also a Windows and Linux version of the dedicated server, so you can run your own servers for the game.
Yes. And on top of that, Raxi's build system that we were talking about last week has been set up to work with Epic's build.
So the other thing that was released that we should mention too is Rush released a UT launcher, and it has a list of servers that are hard-coded into it basically with player counts and who's playing on them. And that's a really nice tool too, to be able to find servers to play on with other people. And we'll post links to both of those things in the description below.
Yeah, the launcher is really the way to play right now. One thing that I will say about it is I hope that we're careful about when we decide to make the build. So something that happened today was that Steve made this really anticipated change to the Flak cannon,
yep,
which we'll talk about a little bit later because we have tested it on our own. But the Flak cannon projectile change did not make it into the build. So
yep,
we weren't able to test it in a multiplayer setting.
Yep, and we probably won't be able to test it now for next
a whole week.
Yeah.
If they make a significant change halfway through the week, I would hope that they make a build halfway through the week and push that out so that it's easier for us to play test.
It is a hard thing because we know that they're making a lot of changes, and so it's hard to judge, is this one important enough for us to make a new build? And plus, they have one person on their team, it seems like, Pete, right now, that's running the builds. So he would have to go through this whole process, and we don't really know what this process entails on their end. I think this brings up an important point, that there are super necessary changes like the Flak trajectory, which everybody has been complaining about, that it's disheartening to not see in the build today, especially when the build was just a few hours before that fix went in.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because it was like, we saw that change, and then the next thing I knew, I heard, oh, they actually posted a build, and I'm like, oh, yes. And then I saw which revision number it was, and I was like, crap.
Yeah.
No, that was too early in the day.
Yep.
All right, so let's go into the changes for this week. So first of all, there is an entry level.
Woo!
Yeah, so you get the original UT menu music, and there's an Unreal Tournament logo, and that's pretty much it right now.
Yep.
But hopefully it turns into a full-blown menu, yeah?
Yeah, it's kind of like the menu in the original Unreal Tournament, if you think about it, because whenever you joined a server, between connecting to the server and actually joining into the level it was playing, it would show you the Unreal Tournament logo on a black background. That's kind of the same.
Yeah, it's exactly the
concept we've got right now.
Yep. Right, and like we said earlier, they changed the Flak trajectory.
Yeah, so the Flak trajectory before, basically, no matter what angle you shot it at, it would land in essentially the same place on the ground, and it was slow and it was easy to catch up to. If you were running in the same direction that you shot the Flak shell in, you could catch up to it basically before it hit the ground. The change that they made is they basically made it so that if you're aiming higher than straight ahead, the horizon, then it'll shoot in a high arc, and if you're aiming lower than the horizon, it'll shoot in a flatter arc. I'm guessing that the reason they're doing that is because they figure if you're aiming up, you're trying to shoot someone far away or high up, and the higher arc helps with that. And if you're shooting it lower to the ground, then you're actually trying to shoot somebody closer, and the flatter arc helps you out. But it does make the trajectory a little bit unpredictable. Knowing what the point at which it changes from high to low is a little bit confusing. That's my 2 cents on how it is right now.
Yeah. So the other thing that they did change about it, though, was that they decreased the initial projectile speed that it has by about 100 units, and then they increased the amount of height that it gets. So it has much more of an arc to it. And it's kind of funny because even though the projectile is actually slower, it feels faster, because if you want to shoot something that's really close to you, it gets there faster.
Yeah.
So it is a lot easier to hit somebody with flak secondary if they're close to you, but it still feels like if I'm trying to hit somebody that was like around a corner, or like I'm backing around a corner and I'm trying to hit the person that's following me, it's just totally random because it takes so long to get to its destination.
Yeah.
And the arc just doesn't feel even close to any of the other UT games. It still feels really weird.
Yeah. In addition to that, just the randomness of what angle you're aiming at, changing the arc of the flak shell, makes it hard to know whether you're going to hit the person that you're aiming at or not. The other thing that I would say about it too is that even though they slowed it down and it's not as easy to catch up to it, it still feels so slow.
They totally revamped the dodge roll and the wall slide. So I'm just going to go through the whole slate of things, what the default is, because they've also added some options to turn things on and off. There is a new key. It is currently bound to shift, that will allow you to activate these moves now. So if you are next to a wall and you are in the air and you press and hold shift, you will wall slide. If you are dodging and you press and hold shift, then you will do the roll move. They've also introduced a standalone roll. If you do a dodge while you are holding shift, then you'll just straight roll instead of dodging.
Yep.
I do like that it's activated by a key. That's something that we complained about quite a bit last week. But the way that they've done it right now, I think, is almost worse. So what happens right now is that if you want to wall slide because you're pressing and holding shift, you almost always end up doing the roll when you land too.
Yep. Yeah, it's impossible to control really because you don't know when you're going to land off of the wall slide. And especially if you wall slide into something else, if you do a slope dodge and into a wall slide and land on a box or something, there's no way to judge that distance perfectly, and you're almost always going to roll on the boxes.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know if it's judging it, because there was times where I thought that I was letting go of it just before I landed, and I still rolled. I really wish that Epic would come out and explain why they've set it up the way that they've done. I mean, we've played with it, and I think we have kind of an idea of why they're doing it. It seems to me like they're trying to make these moves easier to do.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, I'm having a really hard time understanding and justifying their particular implementation of it. For me, I would think that for a wall slide, that you should use space to activate it. Because a wall slide is a lot like a double jump, right?
Yep.
You're in the air, you're next to the wall, you hold space bar, you slide.
Yep.
Roll, I would expect that you use the crouch button and you hold crouch to activate that.
Yep.
If they were bound to separate keys, then this specific issue that we're talking about wouldn't be a problem.
Yep.
But they're on one key, and thus we have the issue.
Yeah, I think that's true. And simplifying the movement is something that it seems like they're trying to do across the board. Like in previous weeks, they have added way to dodge with a single key, either by tapping it while you're moving or holding it before you press a movement key or while you're pressing a movement key to activate a dodge. I think for me that part of the frustration with that aspect of it is it takes away a lot of the finesse or skill and learning how to move around properly. But then when you start adding multiple types of movement mechanics to the same key, it gets into kind of that console feeling where, you know, the A button does something different depending on what situation you're in. And this is a complaint that a lot of people have with console games in general, but just as an example, because it's in this wheelhouse, in Gears of War, the A button does something different depending on if you're in cover mode or not in cover mode, or running or not running. The other keys that's true of as well. And the reason why that's annoying is because you lose a lot of predictability. If there's multiple things that happen when you press one key, then you have to know exactly what scenarios that key does X or Y or Z. And it gets really frustrating trying to make those determinations while you're in the heat of combat.
I have found that these mechanics screw me up. So one that has really been bothering me in the playtest that we did today was the single tap wall dodge. So right now, if you are next to a wall and you just tap the movement key, you'll dodge. You don't have to double tap to do a wall dodge. There's a couple of times you'll see in the podcast video where I ended up wall dodging in a critical situation when I did not intend to. And I went back into IRC and I was talking to the guys about this, and everybody said, yes, I've done that too. A couple of the better players, Skeptica in particular, said, oh, I just turned that off, because there's an INI to turn that particular feature off.
Yeah.
I'd also say there is an INI to allow the pushing into the wall for a wall slide instead of having to activate it for a key.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody will ever actually use those, because even if it's rare, if it happens one time in a match, that's one time too many, because that could have been a flag capture for me.
Yeah.
And I missed it.
Well, and if you think about it, just goes back to what we've talked about in previous podcasts, where mechanics that activate automatically, quote unquote automatically, they end up causing you problems enacting a mechanic that you didn't intend to enact. So in the case of wall slide before, pushing into the wall, there were a lot of things that could push you into a wall that would cause the wall slide to happen, and it would frustrate people because they didn't want the wall slide to happen in that situation, and frequently it would get them killed. And the same could really be said of the single tap wall dodge. So there are advantages to it, of course, which the advantages are you can do a lot of moves in tight corridors that you normally wouldn't be able to do with double tapping, because you couldn't double tap in opposite directions fast enough to do the movements that you can pull off. But the disadvantage there, of course, is that now any time that you just tap the arrow key when you're in the range of a wall, you're going to wall dodge off of the wall automatically. That's just yet another thing that can get in the way of the finesse of playing the game.
I'm afraid to do things when I'm next to walls now, for fear that I'm going to dodge somewhere and do something that I don't want to.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on, with the roll, another change that they made was they increased the speed of the roll itself. So it went from 880 to 920, and again, keep in mind that normal running speed is 960. So it's a little bit slower than running speed, but not by much.
Yeah.
And it's a very small change, but you can tell.
Yeah.
The dodge speed landing factor on the roll is still different.
Exactly.
So even though it's slower than running speed, you can technically get a little bit of a speed boost from doing it if that value is too high. And I haven't tested that, or at least I wasn't able to determine if that was the case with the race maps yet.
Yeah.
So if it does there, it's very negligible. Is it more useful now? Not really.
All we really have to go on is what Epic has said in the past. Epic said that for the dodge roll, their intention was to be able to mix up movement during combat. Mm-hmm. And if that's the intention of this, then I still don't think that the speed is good enough, because it could be good enough. The reason why I say it could be good enough is that if the dodge roll is close to movement speed, then you at least have the speed of running around the level, which is factored into all that stuff. But the problem with dodge roll is you have no control over it. You can't stop it from happening and change directions. You're committed to the path that you took with the roll. And I think that all of that stuff just weighs into negatively affecting its usefulness during combat. So to me, this change affects how useful it is for traversal more than it does for combat. Based on what Epic has said, that's kind of contrary to their intentions for that mechanic.
Sure. On the split side, there is the standalone roll now. Part of the issue with the dodge roll is that you're dodging and then you're doing an additional roll on top of that. And you have enough time to react that when they go into the roll, you can basically pick them up on the other side and just hit them in the face with Flak. With the single roll as it is now, they're basically done with the move by the time you even realize what they're doing.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to me like it would throw somebody's aim off. So it's really kind of more of a flare. But I do think that the roll on its own is a lot better than the dodge roll.
It may just be like doing a taunt in the middle of combat, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's very much what it's like. So it's a weird animation.
But it's obvious what's happening. That's why when people do the dodge roll, it's so easy to just run up to them and take them out. Epic has said that this could be used to take out headshot damage entirely while you're doing the roll, but I've been headshot while I've been rolling, so that clearly doesn't exist yet, or it's buggy. Without that, the roll doesn't really have much usefulness.
And the thing is it kind of almost makes you a target.
Yeah.
You know? So in Unreal Tournament 2003, it was like if you were using the default model, so if you were using Gorge, I just wanted to kill you.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the dodge roll. If I see you dodge rolling, it's like, oh, well, you can do that. Well, watch what happens when you get Flak to the face, right? It just makes me want to hit you.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just me because I just don't have a high opinion of the mechanic yet. But so let's move on. One last thing that I do want to point out is that they have added a breathing sound when you sprint. So it's nice that now it's a little bit easier to tell when the sprint starts. I don't like the sound effect at all. Every time that I start sprinting, I want to stop because I can hear the person breathing.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, I think that one of the problems with that is that people in this game are constantly trying to turn off all these weird ambient sounds so that they can hear other people better. And this is just another thing where if you happen to be running in a straight line for too long, all of a sudden you can't hear anything else other than your own breathing, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just another sound added to all these other sounds that are going on. I think that competitive people would find it frustrating.
They're gonna try and turn it off.
Yeah.
They're absolutely gonna try and turn it off. The strange thing about it though, and I think that the mechanic is doing what they intended to. Because when I started doing it, I realized, you know what? I actually do sprint every once in a while. Just naturally moving through the map, there are some instances where I'll start to sprint a little. But my reaction right now is, oh, I'm sprinting. That means I'm walking in a straight line. I better stop.
Yeah.
that breathing sound is kind of a warning to me right now that I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah, that's true. The problem for me with sprint right now is that I find that there are other advantages to moving the way that people do through maps, and sprint doesn't come with any of those advantages. It encourages running in straight lines, taking really wide arcs on your turn so that you don't run out of your speed. Really, to me, encourages playing the game in a way that you shouldn't be encouraging.
Yeah. So I think of UT movement as like boxing, right? Dodging is a lot like boxing in your footwork with boxing. Imagine if you had a boxer, all of a sudden he started walking around the rink in really long circles instead of doing the footwork like they should. It's going to be bad for that boxer. And I've noticed that happens in UT now. So if you start sprinting to try and get somewhere faster, I found that what'll happen is I'll get to the destination and I'll find the person, and then I have a hard time making the transition into going back into the dogfighting kind of style.
Yeah.
There's been a couple of times where I've said, well, I could probably sprint, and then when somebody comes along, it's really easy to just stop sprinting. But I found that every time that I do that, I get killed.
Yeah. Well, and this is something that Satan's father on the forums brought up quite a while ago, and that's that one of the advantages to dodge spamming is that it teaches you how to move during combat also is a value to moving around the map.
It gets you in the mode.
But with sprint, you don't have that advantage at all. I mean, it's teaching you to do something that's just as liable to get your head popped off as it is to get you to where you're trying to go. I don't know what other people's experience is with UT, but I've found whenever I'm playing and I'm feeling lazy enough to run in straight lines, there's always somebody with a sniper rifle looking closely enough at me that they can pop my head off without a second thought because I'm just running around in straight lines. And that's my experience in previous games. So to me, that doesn't translate well into a sprint mechanic, but that's just me.
So we've been really hard on sprint, but I do want to say I was wrong in the fact that people are sprinting a little bit. I do not think it gives you an advantage. All right, so let's move on. I've been talking to guys in IRC, looking at the sorts of things that people are posting a lot about on the forum, and tried to come up with top issues that are bothering people right now. These are basically things that people don't like.
Yeah.
And the number one thing is the sniper rifle as a projectile. Oh my gosh. I think you'd be hard pressed to find even one person. Well, I take that back because there was a poll and there was like 20% people that thought it was okay being a projectile. But nobody likes it, man. I know it was an experiment, but I would say that as of so far, this experiment has just failed miserably. Yeah. People avoid using the sniper rifle. Nobody enjoys using the sniper rifle.
The advantage to using the sniper rifle right now is in close range because you don't have to lead as much.
Yeah.
It's completely worthless right now as a long-range weapon. From the top of the tower in face to next to the tower, opposite tower on face right now, it takes long enough for the projectile to reach there that there's no way to predict how far ahead you need to lead in order to get that shot off. In fact, somebody can change directions right now faster than you can even judge the distance that you have to lead on your shot. And so basically avoiding a sniper shot from across face is a walk in the park. So the thing that I wanted to bring up with this is that way back in ye olden days, and when they first announced Unreal Tournament 2007, the sniper shot as a projectile thing came up. And I kind of supported it back then, thinking that it makes a lot of sense for a sniper bullet to be a projectile. What we've found through experimentation in this implementation, at least, is that it's way too unpredictable. With hit scan, you can judge the distance ahead that you need to lead and all that kind of stuff in order to get your shot off. With this projectile method, there's no judging the distance that you need to lead.
So other games where sniper rifle as a projectile has worked, and I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I'm a huge PlanetSide 2 fan. By the way, if any of my old PlanetSide 2 outfit mates are listening to this, I apologize for completely abandoning you, but UT is my home and responsibility, and I had to do it. But PlanetSide 2 is the ultimate sniper game. It is so much fun to snipe in that game. It's such a target-rich environment. You're a sniper, and there's like dozens of people just standing there waiting for their heads to get popped off. And it's a lot of fun. But sniping in that game is also very, very challenging because they've added a ton of factors that you have to compensate for when you snipe. There is travel time. There is drop. Without attachments, it will actually take you out of the scope every time because it's a bolt action. Mm-hmm. So you have to reacquire your target after every shot. And even then, after all of that, people have gotten really, really good at it. But its PlanetSide is a completely different game, right? People aren't zipping around across the map left and right like they are in Unreal Tournament. And it just seems to me that a sniper rifle as a projectile simply cannot work in an arena shooter.
And I think that Wormbo's post in the sniper rifle latency prediction whatever thread, but he's made a couple of posts in there talking about with this tick rate and this distance, this is what happens with the projectile. And I think that he's spot on. I mean, I think that he's brought up exactly the information that needs to be brought up about it to say that having it as a projectile will just cause problems with it. I know that Epic has said that it moves fast enough that it's basically instant, but it's not, especially when you factor in lag and latency. I think that the projectile nature of it just causes too many problems. I just think that it's got to go.
Yep. All right, so the next one is the rockets. There was a little bit of complaining last week about that it wasn't fast enough, so they increased the speed on it, and it made a big difference. And like we were saying last week, it feels really, really great. Some people are saying that it's OP. So one person in particular that I think had a really insightful thoughts about it was Hypno, who was saying that it's just too powerful. And I would definitely agree with that. Right now, this game is basically go and find the rocket launcher and whore that. Because weapon switching doesn't really allow you to use multiple weapons throughout a battle. And if you're going to pick one weapon to go through an entire battle, it's going to be the rocket launcher. But not only that, if you look in the last podcast, you can see several situations where I went on rampages where the other player hardly ever saw me just because I could hit them with the rocket around the corner before they even knew what was going on.
Yeah, part of it is speed. Like, maybe it's a little bit too fast. Another part of it is that a lot of areas of the levels right now are still a little cramped. I mean, if you look at Focus, that's the new name, I guess, of FO8. The hallways to get between the different areas are pretty narrow. And if you ever get caught in one of those hallways with rockets heading towards you, there's no chance that you're going to avoid them. You can't dodge out of the way. You can't deke them or anything. There's no avoiding them. Other aspect of that, too, is that a lot of the other weapons aren't all that great compared to the rocket launcher. I mean, the rocket launcher does 100 damage in one shot. You can kill somebody with one rocket.
If you hit them right on.
If you hit them straight on. The splash damage isn't huge, but people are always stuck in narrow areas where the splash damage doesn't have to be huge to do a lot of damage.
The splash damage is an interesting thing because I found that if I'm not hitting people right on, it'll take me like 3 rockets to take somebody down, which isn't a huge deal because it fires really, really fast.
Yeah.
But I kill myself constantly with it.
Yeah.
And this has been a complaint that a lot of other people have said. So Bobo the Brave, who by the way has some great videos, you should check out his channel, was complaining about that too. And when he shows you in the starting map how far away you can shoot it and still feel the splash damage, it just doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah, the self-damage, there seems like there must be some kind of issue there. It seems like the collision on the rockets is kind of goofy because there's a lot of times where I'll come around a corner with 3 rockets ready to shoot. And my instinct is all 3 of these rockets will fit down this hallway, but one of them will inevitably nail the corner, blow up in my face, and kill me immediately. It happens so frequently, it's really frustrating. That's one of the problems there.
Yep. So that's rockets. The last one that we want to talk about is spectating. There is kind of spectating in the game right now, but it doesn't really work right. It doesn't really work at all.
Yeah.
One of the past podcasts I was saying that it would be really useful if the competitive community was able to put together a pug and broadcast it to show how things like halftime, for instance, work. Mm-hmm. And one of the issues right now is that the spectating is just not good enough to be able to stream something like that.
Yeah.
We're going to be doing that playtest up at Epic in a couple of weeks here. And it would be really nice to be able to stream what we're doing there, to stream those games to everybody else in the community. But if we don't have those spectating tools, we won't be able to do that.
Yeah. Spectating stuff is something that's going to be really useful in the future. I mean, the spectating stuff has got to be there. This has got to be a game that's tuned to esports.
It needs to have the best spectating of any arena FPS ever.
Yep. The competition in spectating competitive matches in games is higher than it's ever been before. I mean, if you look at Dota 2 right now, it's insane how many hours of video is watched, how many hours of spectating happens in that game. At any given time, there's hundreds of thousands of people playing Dota 2, and a good deal of those people aren't even playing the game. They're watching other people play the game. This game has got to hook into that as much as humanly possible. Of course, it's more challenging in an arena FPS. There's a lot of things that have to be factored into the game, and a lot of network related things that have to be happening. And I think it's really important that Epic keeps spectating in mind this entire process, so they don't lose sight of the fact that they have to send all these things over to people that are watching people play in order to make the experience of spectating the best that it's ever been in UT.
Yeah, because there's been a lot of past UTs where when you're spectating, it doesn't look the same as if you're actually playing.
Yeah.
Certain animations don't play, certain things just don't work, and it looks weird. And I would hope that Epic goes in and makes spectating a priority from day one, so that they find those things along the way, instead of doing it like last thing and then realizing, oh, well, we can't actually show that because of X and Y, and there's nothing we can do about it now. There's lots of things that you can do with spectating, right? So there was a thread, I believe Raxi made the thread where he was saying it would be cool if you could actually do a live replay.
Yeah.
Right? That's probably a really, really hard feature that's quite a ways out. But being able to spectate from first-person view with another player is definitely something that could be done in a couple of weeks. Being able to have hotkeys to switch between the players, being able to spectate a particular power-up location, or to spectate whoever is holding the flag, are all things that I think would be relatively simple once the base spectating are in. And I think that this is something that should be made a priority. It feels like this particular tool would be the most useful thing to the community right now. All right, well, that's all we have for this week. As always, please like and subscribe to our channel. If you have some comments on things that we said you think we're full of crap, then please let us know in the comments. And particularly if there's a subject that you would like us to cover, like the ones that we covered this week, let us know and we'll bring them up next podcast.
Yep.
See you next week.